astrophotography. It's been a few years since I've given a presentation on this, so I want to change it a little bit. When I was here 3 years ago, giving a presentation, it was a lot about digital versus film. That debate's kind of long gone, and I did some Photoshop stuff. Today's presentation is going to be a little bit more about if you want to get into astrophotography, what would be some of the equipment that I could recommend. And by no means am I an expert. You can get a dozen astrophotographers up here, and before you know it, they're fighting with each other, saying, no, this is better, or that's better, or whatever. So just some general guidelines.
Can we do that next month?
I want to he's more of an expert than the rest of us.
Mud wrestling.
Yeah, so I'll just give you some general guidelines about some of the equipment that I recommend. Little background about myself. I've been teaching science here at Berthoud High School since 1995. I teach chemistry, physics, astronomy here, night astronomy. In fact, one of my students is here, so he's already seen this presentation. Bear with us. But anyway, so I've been teaching astronomy, physics, and chemistry at Berthoud High School. I love teaching science here and all the activities that go on at the observatory. And I've been doing astrophotography for about 25 years now, what I recommend. So I'm an old film guy and switched over to the dark side about 10 years ago to digital, and there's no looking back. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and go through the presentation. And I probably put way too many slides on here because I learned the first year as a teacher, if you don't over-prepare and have a lesson plan that goes beyond the end of the bell, your students will have a lesson plan for you. So too many slides on here, so some of them I'll probably go through a little faster than normal. So this is the basic outline. Getting started, I start off with the easiest, cheapest way to get into astrophotography and kind of tiered it to work up to prime focus imaging, which would be the most expensive, challenging of the three. I prefer all three of those. Simple earth and skies, it's more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, I think. The prime focus is very technical. I kind of go year by year. Like this past year I started getting more into prime focus, but in the previous year when I got my new Canon camera, everything was earth and sky. So I like all types of astrophotography. And then interwoven in the presentation will be the equipment as we go through. So the reason I got into astrophotography is because of this slide right here, basically. When I first looked at beautiful astronomy pictures, I can remember as a 9th grade learning about astronomy in the textbook, I would see pictures like this. I thought, wow, that's beautiful. Look at that nebula. Look at the color. So I asked for a telescope when I was a freshman in high school, and I get, the classic Janssen 60mm refractor, learn the night sky, find the Orion Nebula, and even with a really good scope, that's what you're going to see. I was like, what's up with that? It's just kind of a letdown. You can see the detail, and yeah, it's nice, but there's no color there because the light levels are so low, you're not activating the cones in your eye, just the rods. Like when the sun sets and it's evening, you're seeing everything in black and white. You don't realize it. It's subconscious. You've been seeing it your whole life that way. You need light to be at a certain level to activate the cones. So that's what shows up on your detector, your film, your digital camera, or whatever. After about 5 minutes or whatever, you get all the reds of the Orion Nebula. And that's what got me hooked into nighttime astronomy or astrophotography, was seeing things that the eye couldn't see in low levels of light. Just a real quick lowdown on how you do astrophotography. I'll leave it up to my students here, and Matt, you probably remember this in night astronomy last week when we had the supermoon. We give the kids a green laser and a cell phone that can do long exposures, and look at what they can come up with. So that's actually right there on the side of the building. We were just kind of killing time. Everything was so bright. So they're aiming the green laser at the building there. One kid's drawing a house and doing whatever. And after a 2-minute exposure, path of the laser records everything. And that's the principle of astrophotography. You just lock the lens open, and any motion moving across will be absorbed, whether it's a star trail or whatever. So to me, that kind of summarizes how it all works. The basic equipment you need to get started with is some type of DSL camera. I use a simple lens. I just picked this up at Jack's. This is a digital timer right here. And I'll get into some of the lenses I can recommend. But this is the old Canon that I used to use. But if you want to get a really good one, there's some different ones on here I'll show you. It used to be Canon was the way to go. Everybody would take the Canon because they had the best processing, low noise, and that kind of stuff.
Move that way a little bit.
But since then, Nikon and even Sony have kind of caught up, and now they're all pretty much in the same league. And you hate to say one's better than the other, but 10 years ago, all the astrophotographers were using the Canon camera. So there's a couple ones. These two in particular are highly recommended by astrophotographers. The T6i or the 750 or the Nikon, simply because the focuser in the back can tilt, which is a huge advantage. If you're trying to look at something and photograph straight up or whatever, and you're trying to get your neck like that, you're going to get a backache. So those have tiltable screens, which make it really nice. Are they a requirement? No, but they're an extra nice thing that makes it easier with astrophotography. So that's a good place to start. And with the lens, that'll get you going. Get a tripod and something like this, and you can go out and take some nice Milky Way shots. If you got the money to spend, the best one would be these guys down here. So I just got a Canon 60 a couple years ago. Oh my God, it was phenomenal. How much more resolution you could get, the image size and everything else. Now I can't stop taking pictures. Anytime it's clear, I'm out there with the Canon going up the Pinewood Reservoir and taking astrophotos. So those are kind of a good place to get started there. So the best lenses, I read this online and I kind of took the advice of it and I went for it. The Rokinon, I've heard it pronounced different things. The Rokinon lenses in particular, got a picture of them right there, they offer more bang for the buck. Relatively inexpensive for a high quality lens. Those lenses there might cost about $300 to $400. If you were to get the same equivalent lens with that f-stop from Canon or Nikon, it would be 3 to 4 times the price. The disadvantage is it's all manual. There's nothing automatic about it, which is fine for astrophotography. You don't need all that automated stuff. So that article I read online about the Rokinon lenses, I gave it a try and I was sold on it. For the quality, you don't get these cheap lenses will make seagulls in the corner of your lens because of the aberrations of the lens. So that's what I'd recommend for the lenses. And here's some Milky Way shots. So I have a couple of them I took with the Rokinon lens. That's with the Canon 60 up on Rocky Mountain National Park.
How long an exposure spent?
This is probably, I'm doing 15 seconds. Approximately 15 seconds at about 1600 ISO.
Okay.
So in terms of tracking, you really, with the new digital cameras, you really don't need a star tracker if you're using a wide angle lens. So, which saves you a ton of money and a headache. You know, you just put it on a fairly high ISO setting. Now it is a mosaic. I took a picture here and then a second picture there, and then on Photoshop just put the two together. If you use a wider angle lens, you kind of get a more of a warped effect. But very easy to do with a good camera and a good lens. And you notice that the stars, even in the corner of the images there, are pretty pinpoint. Maybe actually, I think if you dim the lights a little better, might, I don't know if the filming still shows up okay. Yeah. So that would be a 24 millimeter. I find 24 is a good compromise in terms of your field of view and the speed of the lens. But once again, you have to do a mosaic to get the whole sky in like that. And this is one of my favorite spots to go, Pinewood Reservoir, because I live in Loveland, so it's just, 15 minutes shot up the road there, up Lodgepole Drive. And there's the reservoir there. It's a beautiful July night. And once again, that's with the 24 millimeter lens. And back up here. There's a couple frames here. So this is actually 4 pictures. So there's 2 on the bottom and then 2 on the top. And you just stitch them together. You got the whole Milky Way kind of stretching overhead. That light you see there is all Loveland's light pollution. But actually, I used to get real negative about light pollution, but it actually adds some aesthetics to the picture. You get the golden glow of the clouds off of the lake, and without the light pollution, you wouldn't have any of that. So for this type of photography, sometimes a little bit of glow in the distance actually adds a nice touch of color. Which you can see in this picture here. This is, you probably know this area, just west of Laramie, at the Laramie River Lookout. And this glow right here is Fort Collins off in the distance. But it adds a nice touch to the color. If that wasn't there, your sky is just kind of that monochrome blue color. And there's your Milky Way there. And this last one, this is my latest image here I took in Moab, Utah. And many frames went into this mosaic. I love the sky in Moab. We got the Milky Way there, a little bit of light glow there from Moab, but not too bad.
How many shots in that?
So that is actually 21 images stitched together. That took a while to put together on Photoshop. And don't ask me how many megabytes that file was when my computer started to slow down a little bit. Putting all those.
That's when the internet went dark.
Yeah, exactly. So that's simple Earth and sky Milky Way shot, tripod camera, nothing too fancy. You don't need the Canon 6D for that. You can use your regular DSL Canon. If you were going to spend any money on it, I would recommend on a good lens. a Rokinon lens, and I believe Rokinon makes them for nighttime cameras also. But that's the way to go. And find a dark sky site, and you can take some really nice Milky Way pictures.
This is 60 is what you use?
Yeah, I use the 60. And I know a lot of people that use the 5D too and have great results, but that's just giving you a larger frame, fuller frame. So, and star trail images, you don't see as many people doing star trail images. That was more of a film thing. With digital, you can still do star trails, but I don't see nearly as many pictures of people just doing star trails. In fact, I hardly ever do them all at all. But if you were going to do them, you find the Big Dipper, Ursa Major, go to the star Polaris, and everything's going to circle around Polaris. Polaris almost stands still. It's just a hair off from being due north there. So there's a nice picture I took. That's an old film image, and you can see Polaris there. About a 10-minute exposure. If you were going to do that with a digital camera, you would want to program it with this thing. So maybe you're taking 3-minute exposures, but sequence back to back to total up for 15, 20 minutes or whatever you need, and then you just stack all those images together, and you got the continuous star trail. I even saw one person did a really neat idea. He actually stole my idea. He did Morse code SOS with star trails. Which is pretty easy, so he beat me to the punch on that one. There's a nice old film image I took in Boulder there, the Flatirons, but you can see the North Star would be over in this direction here, so everything's got kind of a bigger circle there. It's more of a 50-minute exposure. You can see NCAR up on the hill there. And this one was just a dumb luck shot. I was in Moab and I was waiting for the quarter moon to set. What am I going to do, because I wanted to take some pictures of galaxies. And I thought, I'll just aim a picture of these buttes, but the moonlight illuminated it perfectly. So, just in a 15-minute exposure, you can see the buttes really clear, the North Star up there. That was the best shot I got on the whole trip. The galaxy images were trash. So you never know what you'll do with this. Now, Earth and sky, I got a few shots in here. I took this, like I said, Pinewood Reservoir is one of my favorite areas to go. There's that magic 15 minutes, and those of you probably know what I'm talking about. We were just talking about that earlier. As soon as the sun sets, it's not quite dark yet. Everything on the camera, just amazing pictures. The reflection of the setting sun off the water and everything, that's that magic moment. It's also the best time to take pictures of the moon. So the pictures of the moon was right after the sunset. If the sky was completely dark, the contrast between the moon and the sky, it wouldn't come out right. And the moon is actually one of the most difficult things to photograph. But if you can catch it right after the sunset, get the reflection on the water, that makes for a nice shot. So I've got Venus sitting right there, and that was the crescent moon a couple weeks ago, and that's Pinewood Reservoir up there. And this is through the telescope. I used to be, back in the 90s, I was at a number of galleries in the Front Range, and I would sell all kinds of astrophotos. And for every astrophoto I sold, I probably sold 3 or 4 of those. People just, they want to see the picture of the moon in the Front Range. And it took me about 6 months, because sometimes I wanted it to be natural. I didn't want to Photoshop at all. But sometimes the moon would set over here, sometimes it sets over there because of the inclination of the orbit. And finally I got everything lined up just right. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning in June. Just as the sun was rising, it illuminates the Twin Peaks there as the moon was setting behind it. So it's one of those shots I had in my mind. I knew what it wanted to look like. And every morning I would wake up when there was the full moon at about 4 in the morning and set my camera up and try to get the picture. But that's actually through the telescope, so that was a wide field shot. And there's Horsetooth Reservoir with the 3rd quarter moon setting, not Horsetooth, sorry, Horsetooth Rock. You guys are familiar with that in Fort Collins. And that's the Laramie River place I was talking about where I go to. I take a lot of astrophotos there, but just a real nice shot right as the sun was setting, caught the rainbow over there. And lightning photography, that's a really neat hobby. You want to make sure you're not in the rain though. Do it with a telephoto. If it's raining on you, you're too close, okay? So this is something that's better at a distance. But I was in Pawnee Grasslands, beautiful clear night. You can see the stars up above here. And all of a sudden this cumulonimbus cloud just rolled down the front plains there. And I was like, I got to get some shots of that. So I just started, this was the old film day. You couldn't tell if the pictures were coming out or not. So I just started taking pictures with the telephoto, and most of them were really bad. I had one shot where everything was lined up just right. Taking the picture, waited for the flash, and then closed the lens. And it all lined up perfectly there. So kind of a lucky shot there. And, what's that?
Blue Jack too.
Yeah. Pinewood Reservoir, coming down the hill, you know what I'm talking about? That beautiful view of Loveland as you're coming through, that was another storm I caught off in the distance there with the telephoto lens. So all of that's Loveland right there. I haven't done much storm photography lately, but I know there's some people that really do amazing stuff with that. Coldest night of my life right there. I remember that well. 2 years ago, I was up Cameron Pass, late December. It was cold down here, you know what it was like on Cameron Pass? Had to be -50. My hands were literally frozen to this tripod. I was like in that Christmas story with the guy, his tongue frozen in the cold there. So I ran out of the truck and got a nice picture of Orion. It was kind of like what Ryan White was describing. When it's so cold that clouds are just condensing in the air out of there. So it was a crystal clear night that, you know, just a little bit of moisture and the clouds were condensing. A nice picture of Orion there. And pointing down to Sirius, and that's probably Fort Collins off in the distance there. So once again, just it was this camera set up right here on the tripod.
24 millimeter?
Yeah, that was the 24mm lens. That's, just a partial composite. So this is your field of view pretty much with the 24mm. So then I just got a little bit more to add the landscape, and so it was a real simple mosaic there, nothing too fancy. And this is, you know those soap operas where they have the love scenes and everybody's real fuzzy and it's like kind of soft glow? You take one of those soft glow fog filters, put it on a camera, not for a love scene, but for this, and all the bright stars stand out, kind of fuzz balls there. So I do this when I teach the kids the constellations, because I said, now you can really see Taurus the bull, the V shape of the bull and the Pleiades. So just put a little fog filter on, take a picture of the constellations, and the brighter stars will kind of fog out there.
Scott, but yet that did not affect
The foreground, that's a composite right there. So that's how the eye would have seen it, so that's my justification. Okay? But I mean, the stars would have been not fuzzed out. Because, you know, your eyes would take in the Pleiades and Taurus the bull, and you could still see the moon was illuminating the buttes. But when I took that picture, that's an old film image, you know, the buttes are dark and you can see the sky. So I'm taking two different exposures to kind of show it as the eye would see it with the moon setting behind you there. And then here's a really cool special effect you can do. I'll kind of demonstrate it. When you put it on the tripod and you're in focus, so you have it on Orion, about every 15 seconds you rotate about a quarter of a turn. And then you wait another 15 seconds, a quarter of a turn, and then you wait again another quarter of a turn. And as the constellation treks across the sky, you get that kind of effect. So there's Orion progressively getting more and more out of focus. You can see the colors of Betelgeuse in the Orion Nebula. But it really shows you the motion, and it really makes the stars stand out in terms of their color. So nothing fancy, just a little creativity with the focusing there.
If you want to practice that, you can just, when you get your Christmas tree up, put the camera up on the tripod, put it on bulb, and rotate it, you know, all the way from out to in. And you get the whole thing zoomed in on you. It's a lot of fun.
I never tried that with the Christmas tree. Okay, so let's say you get hooked on astrophotography. You're like, okay, what's the next step? Would be piggyback astrophotography. Essentially, the camera is riding on top of the telescope, or you've got a separate mount that has a tracker on it. Either way you go. Now you've got some motorized device that's moving across the sky, so you can use more of a telephoto lens. This is actually one of my favorite types of photography. Some of my favorite pictures were taken with the piggyback, not with the telescope itself. You can build a barn door tracker for about $5. I'll show you a picture of that. But here's kind of the extreme in terms of price range of what you could go with. So this guy over here is probably just used for a couple $100. In fact, we have a telescope back there that's identical to that. Put a little motor on it, and there's a little film camera. You're talking a couple $100. Or this is probably more expensive than most of the cars that you took to drive here with. Okay, with the Paramount, 2 Takahashis, and Lord knows what else he's got on there. That's just insane.
Is that your wish list, Scott?
I was going to say that's more than my house, I think. So, I mean, that's overkill, but still, okay. Basically, your motors are moving across the sky, and that's tracking for you the image you're seeing. The next picture I'm going to show you is going to be what not to do when you do this, because the first time I did this, I had the camera aimed too low, and you're going to see the front of the telescope right there. Okay, so always aim a little bit higher. Okay, it would have been a beautiful picture of Comet Hale-Bopp, but that thing got in the way. So.
How long a track shot was this?
That's probably about 5 minutes. That was where I used to live in Lyons, so there was a little bit of light pollution there. But
So how is it then, if you're tracking across the sky and starting to stay non-blurred, that the foreground, the mountain, it's also not blurred? I would expect it to
and
be.
yeah, there's a little bit of blurriness to it. When you enlarge it, you can see it more with that tree down there and that rock. Like if I were to take a still picture, all those would be sharper lines.
Oh,
So in 5 minutes, it hasn't moved too much for a 50mm lens.
okay.
But if that were a telephoto, then yeah, you would definitely notice the movement of the rock there. And this is a barn door tracker, so 2 pieces of wood right there, and basically you're rotating that bolt. I think on line directions they tell you, say you do about a quarter of a turn every 15 seconds. And as long as you line it up to the North Star Polaris, you can put a motor on there even, then it's going to compensate for the Earth's rotation, and that'll work relatively good for an 85mm lens. I wouldn't want to push it too much for the big telephoto lens, but most of your standard lenses, you could do some nice shots with that. And here's some things this is not my personal opinion, I've never owned this stuff, but I've heard good reviews from Ioptron in terms of quality and price, and there's many, many other vendors out there that sell stuff similar to this. But this thing would mount on the top of a tripod if you already have one of those, and then you put your camera on there and it's motorized, and it has a polar alignment, find the North Star, and then this one, you got the whole mount there. So relatively speaking, for about that price, you can start tracking and doing what we call piggyback astrophotography. And now you're on a whole nother level for a type of photography you can do for fairly inexpensive if you've already got the camera and the tripod there. But like I said, there's many other ones out there, the Star Tracker, different ones. I personally don't use those because I just happen to have a telescope already and I just piggyback on that. Here's an example of what you would do with a 200mm lens, and that's, anybody recognize that? Star cluster? The double cluster?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the double cluster in Cassiopeia. So real easy cluster to photograph. It's a good place to start. But the stars are all pinpoint, so you couldn't do that without tracking. Everything would be streaked out. And here's one of my favorite shots. This was an old film image I took in NORAD, Utah. Super dark sky. And there's Scorpio. You're looking at the front of the Scorpio. There's the heart and the tail loops around and the stinger there. All of this is the Milky Way. So somewhere in the center that's the center of the Milky Way. And Sagittarius is over here. This black right here is a butte in the foreground. It's kind of blotted out the stars there. Just an incredible image of detail on there. There's the Lagoon Nebula right there. So all of that was taken with a 70mm lens, while the camera's riding on top of the telescope for about, it's about 50 minutes to get that detail there. This is with 200mm lens I took a couple years ago. I bought an attachment so I can now use a CC view camera with my telephoto lens. So I took a picture of Scorpio right here, and it's actually a mosaic. There's 2 images here because with the 200mm lens, that's your field of view. This is one of the hardest areas of the sky to photograph, but it's also one of the most beautiful. That's called Rupiahs, and there's Antares there. So you're on the line between 2 constellations, but the colors there are just incredible. The problem is it doesn't get higher than about 20 degrees above the horizon, maybe 30 degrees at its highest point. So you're going through all these layers of atmosphere, plus you've got Denver to the south, which is where that object is. So ideally to shoot that, you need to get south of Denver, and you've only got about 1 month out of the year where you can do that, in the month of June or July, around there. Any other time it's not high enough in the sky. Just a neat area of the sky to photograph. Okay, and there's Comet Hale-Bopp. And this one, you can probably tell, is a composite image because the mountains are much sharper on here. So I was tracking across the sky. That's about a 20-minute track. You can see the Andromeda Galaxy there, the blue ion tail, and then the mountains are there. But the moon was out, and the mountains really did look like that. It was illuminating the mountains under the moonlight. So I'm trying to say this is how your eyes saw it. So yeah, it's an old film image, and I scanned in a picture of the mountains I had to expose when the camera wasn't moving, and then there's the picture of the Comet Hale-Bopp up there. And you can see the double cluster there too. And a nice picture of Orion with a 50mm lens. I added some spikes to the stars there, just kind of make them stand out a little bit. You can see the belt. Sure. So yeah, there's an add-on you can do on Photoshop where you can actually add diffraction spikes. Sometimes it adds a nice touch to the picture. And there's the North American Nebula I took with a 200mm camera lens, and S-Big CCD camera. Took that in my backyard where I live in Loveland. There's all kinds of light pollution there. But it was just an H-alpha filter, so it blocks out most of the light pollution and you're able to get all that detail there. And then here it is on a narrow band image. Once again, that's not through the telescope, just with a telephoto lens.
You have just an additional filter on it, that's
Yeah, so this one right here is with 3 narrow bands. So I use a hydrogen, an oxygen 3, and a sulfur. And did that Hubble palette, kind of like the Hubble Space Telescope does. So this one right here is just the H-alpha filter. But the neat thing about that is you can live in the city. You don't have to travel to a dark sky site. With using these narrow band filters, you can, take some decent pictures of the astro. And anybody recognize this nebula? It's a state.
The California Nebula.
Yeah, see the California Nebula? Right there. So that was a 200 millimeter telephoto lens I took in Wyoming there. Okay, now here's where the real fun begins. Sticking the camera into the telescope. It's called prime focus astrophotography. It's definitely more technical, but I think the rewards are just as great. You do need a little bit more equipment. Something called a T adapter. That's the first thing you need. Is you've got to figure out how am I going to take this lens off here and attach it to my telescope. You need a motorized tripod, and this is the setup I used for many years. This is a 5-inch astrophysics. A lot of the film images I took with that. So the camera would go in the back there. Then I have a guide scope on top, and this is an ST auto guider, and that plugs into a little program right there, a computer, which basically goes to the motors, and every second it does a pulse adjustment on the fly. The amazing thing about this, I bought this in 1996. This is still my same auto guider. It's way beyond its lifetime. So I swear by their stuff. S-Big is the company. They make stuff that's built to last. I still use this as an auto guider in the field with a different telescope, of course. But in addition to that, you got to find a dark sky site, because with prime focus astrophotography, light pollution is a big killer unless you use a narrow band. So here we are, Loveland, Fort Collins area, and the place I like to go is down here in the desert southwest, because it's usually clear, beautiful dry skies. If you can handle the weather, Wyoming's also nice too. Nevada, you just want to stay clear of Nevada. That place is weird. Sorry, I was talking to you guys back there. I've heard of stories of people going to Nevada and not coming back.
So, Scott, would you please explain the auto guider, because you already have a driving system that tracks
The stars.
It's tracking, but does the auto guider then make small corrections?
Yeah, it's minute adjustments. Like, for example, that 18-inch telescope up there in the long refractor also. I mean, that's a killer drive system for visual. You think it's dead center.
Right.
You go 5 minutes and all of a sudden you find out you got trails going on.
Oh, so even
So it's
for
minute because
even for 5 minutes?
yeah, even for 5 minutes I noticed, because I have students take their cameras and we have the adapter for the astrophysics and we put it in there. After 5 minutes, they're no longer pinpoint. So what that auto guider is doing, basically, every second it's making a pulse adjustment. Very, very minute adjustment. It's I think it's on like 1/132nd of a tracking thing. So if you were to hit that button and watch it with your eye, you wouldn't even hardly see it move. But every second, and it'll give you a readout on how many airs you're reading. It's actually picking up the scintillation of the atmosphere, the twinkling of the stars. So when I do this in Colorado, my airs are about 4 or 5, just because of the vibrations of the atmosphere it's trying to adjust for. When I go to Moab, the airs are 0 or 1. So it's that fine, and as you accumulate past 5 or 10 minutes, especially anything greater than an f6 focal length, those airs really do show up. So yeah, I was surprised with it too. I thought, I spent a fortune on this mount, how come I need an auto guider? But yeah, it really is. In terms of telescopes, this is what I highly recommend if you want to start off. This is considered affordable, okay? And that's a really good telescope for the price. It's a 4-element design. The thing that makes it nice is there's a lens in the back that's called a field flattener that as you focus it, the field flattener moves with it. So it's optimized for that telescope. If you're ever going to buy a telescope for astrophotography, I recommend the website AstroBin. You can just type in, if you type in that telescope, AstroBin, it'll show you dozens and dozens of astrophotos taken with that particular telescope. And then you can compare it to another telescope that you might be considering. and you can see what other people are doing with that same scope. To me, it's the best way to find out, is this telescope for me? Because it'll give you the kind of field of view that people are getting with that. And I'm blown away, even the experts that have been doing this for years are blown away that for $600 you can get a telescope that's easy to use. You don't need a gigantic mount to put it on, flat field across, you don't have seagulls in the corners. And another big thing is you don't have blue fringes around the stars. So how they can do that for $600 is pretty amazing. But that's a good place to start.
You have to watch for when they're available too.
Yeah, that's true.
They tend to go in
They'll
batches.
Yeah, they'll come in, a truckload will come in, and then they'll be sold like that. So that tells you something about it. This is another way to go. It blows me away. 85 millimeters. I know most people would say that's a tiny little, telescope there. But over $3,000 for that. You're like, what's up with that? But I guarantee, you type in that telescope to Astrobin, and you know what you'll see is a bunch of prize-winning astrophotos of the day pictures taken with that telescope. Just absolutely amazing. When your focal length is 3.5, you capture detail and dust lanes that no other telescope can capture because you're absorbing so much more information on your camera lens than you would with a longer focal length. And to do that with pristine optics, Takahashi's world famous for this. Those things, they have no problem. If you were to buy one of those and you could sell it used for the same price just about. I mean, they don't depreciate. One day I will get one of those. That's kind of a dream astrophotography scope. They also have a 100 millimeter version too, which is a bit more money. But yeah, those things, I can't say enough good things about them. I have a Takahashi, not that particular telescope, and I've looked through hundreds of scopes in my lifetime, and nothing quite focuses like the Takahashi. When you get it in focus, the stars are like bam. It's like pinpoint from edge to edge, crystal clear, like you've never seen before. So there's a reason why they cost that much, but I think they're worth it. In terms of mounts to get, this is a good place to start in terms of price. $700 to that range there. Orion sells some decent ones. There's half a dozen out there in that price range, close to $1,000, $700 to $1,000. That'll get you going. So if you were to buy this particular scope right there, it would be perfect on a mount like that. So
Scott, the Orion scopes are sold by Skywatcher in the United States.
Uh-huh.
They are the identical mount, just a different color, and they are a little cheaper.
Are they? Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the price range. They're $800 to $900. Yeah. So that'll get you started. So there's your mount. There's your telescope. You want to go a little bit fancier, you can see where the price goes way up here. That's considered the beginning of high end, and then of course astrophysics. And I didn't even put Paramount on there, but you'll show up to a star party. Lots of people have these kind of mounts. $10,000 scopes. And then you need a thing to guide. So Orion has come out with a really nice mini auto guider that actually goes into your finder scope. So it's designed and set up for your finder scope, and then that'll do your guiding for you. So relatively inexpensive for something like that. You can go a little bit fancier, and Starlight Express also sells another one. Like I said, I don't have personal experience with this. I'm still using the same one that I've been using since 1996. And then you can use a digital camera like this and plug that into the telescope. Or if you want to take the next step up, you can use what's called a CCD camera. Basically, it's a cool camera so that when you take long exposures, you don't get these speckles in your image. It's kind of a smoother background. It eliminates a lot of electronic noise. And this is a good place to start because it does color for you automatically. Okay, this is the one I'm particularly using here. The problem with this is you've got to take a black and white picture and then a picture with a red, blue, and green filter, and then combine all of those together. So it increases your difficulty for getting a good picture, but the results are a little bit better. But I mean, if you're going to start out, that's a great place to go right there. And here's some pictures I've taken. So now these are all prime focus astrophotos, which means they were taken through the telescope. Okay. So this is the Horsehead Nebula. I took this with the 5-inch astrophysics in Loveland, where I live, with the light pollution. I was still able to get the Horsehead Nebula, which is, it's always too cold to go up to Wyoming in the middle of January to do that picture. So I mean, I was freezing in Loveland as it was. But I would love to be able to go down to, southern New Mexico or whatever, January, and photograph that under a really dark sky.
And any filters?
No, that's a CCD.
Okay.
Pretty much all these are all CCD now. With that S-Big 8300 camera, which I believe is the same size chip that we have for the camera here.
What filters did you use here?
So that's just red, blue, and green, and an L for luminance. I didn't use an HA for that.
Okay.
So just the standard red, blue, green. And same deal here. This was taken with my 100mm Takahashi. And this is my most recent picture. I finally got a chance to redo the Andromeda Galaxy. It's one of my favorite things to photograph. The problem is this galaxy is so big, unless you can get about a $10,000 CCD camera, which is a full field, your field of view always cuts it off. So I actually did 4 pictures here. So you're looking at 4 frames. And I started right at sunset 2 weeks ago, and I was finished 9 hours later. So just about before sunrise, I had taken the last picture. And I got all 4 zoomed together. I was really pleased with the results. I got some of the detail of the nebulas in that distant galaxy there. Got the satellite galaxies. And I just enlarged that. I went up and made a big print, 24 by 30, and it still holds together crystal clear. There's no breakdown of the stars yet, so I don't know how large it will go until it finally breaks down. And here's an old film image. The days of film were so much easier. You just put the camera in.
Right?
Yeah. But you can see the color's not as vibrant there. But that was just, 1 60-minute exposure as opposed to 9 hours. So, and there's the Orion Nebula. This is, once again, it's a mosaic. So there's 2 frames here, and then another frame there. You can see the Running Man Nebula. And there it is with the Hubble palette, the special filters called narrowband filters. Same nebula, but now you're just looking at it under oxygen, sulfur, and hydrogen light. Those green images you see by the Hubble Space Telescope, that's what they're using there, those special filters. And that's Omega Centauri. I was at the Texas Star Party, and that's one of the beautiful clusters that doesn't get higher than the treetops here. But if you head down to Texas, it's high enough in the sky that you can actually photograph that. And that's the Rosette Nebula. And there it is with narrowband. Kind of looks like a tunnel here. This is, by the way, gonna plug in for the radio astronomy guys. So the team that did the STEM project here at Berthoud Observatory with our wonderful mentors here, and they made their discovery. One of the objects was on that Rosetta Nebula, and they measured the expansion rate in radio waves and made some really neat discoveries with that. So, okay, this is a little story on this guy here. For 2 months, I owned a Rishi Cretan, I can never say that it was called an RC 10-inch telescope, and it was just like owning a boat, because the happiest day was the day I sold it. Okay, I was so glad I got that telescope. But, it was okay at making like zoomed-in pictures of the Ring Nebula or the Dumbbell Nebula. It just wasn't for me. I was just so frustrated. All the stars were blocked out, and everything was perfect focus. I mean, there wasn't anything wrong with the scope. But when you go to a focal length of f10, I think that's the same problem issue we'd have if you try to photograph with the 18-inch telescope up there. When you have such a long focal length, you're zoomed into the object, that your stars are always going to look like that. That's why I'm a big fan of the refractors, the really short focal length refractors, and your stars are going to be pinpoint like that. That's one image right there of the North American Nebula, and look at all the pinpoint star images. So a really small refractor is amazing for astrophotography. And this is a recent one I took. Never tried this before, the Veil Nebula. It's a really challenging object because you can barely see this, even with a filter in a dark sky. This is a supernova remnant, about 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. And it's kind of going through the stars in Cygnus right there. They call that the witch's broom. But I caught all this other nebulosity down here. So if I were to go back and add more to this picture, I would take another frame down here, mosaic it together, and then you have the whole complex of the Veil Nebula. And that is red, blue, and green, and an oxygen 3 filter, because that thing really glows in the oxygen gas. So that adds a lot of punch to the picture. And this is the double star cluster with spikes added in. So a little Photoshop trick there. I think this is the last one. This is the Lagoon Nebula. Kind of looks like a clown face there. See the mouth and the 2 eyes. And the Trifid Nebula. Once again, pinpoint star images edge to edge. That's the beauty of a refractor for astrophotography. That's an old film image here. Most of the images you were looking at were digital, but I threw a few film images in there. How are we doing on time? It's about
Pretty good.
Perfect.
Okay, so If I were to give a follow-up presentation on astrophotography down the road, it would be on Photoshop. I don't want to get into Photoshop, but the best astrophotos are done by the really good people that are good image processors. Like, there's a picture of where are you, Sven? Did you hide? There he is in the back there, so that's when Sven was a little kid there. But anyway, that's what you get when you take a normal picture in daylight. That's all of your information in red, blue, and green, okay? And then when you take an astrophoto, that's what you get. And you're like, oh, I was out all night freezing my tail off, and that's what I got. So the trick is to pull out all of that information by stretching the information. So there's a lot of things you can do, and if you do the wrong thing in Photoshop, you'll clip off and lose a lot of the information. So there's a way to stretch it in curves, is the program in Photoshop you use it, so that you keep all that information there. So you can kind of see, here's a step-by-step thing. This is the original download, and then after you stretch it in curves, and then you take the color part that you did in red, blue, and green. This is called your luminance, which is in black and white. There's your red, blue, and green, and then you combine it together, and then you end up with that. From here to there is about 6 hours of processing time, and that's a one-frame, shot in a mosaic. So there's a ton of time. It's not my favorite part of astrophotography. Some people love it, but the best astrophotographers that I see today are really gifted on the Photoshop end of things. Or PixInsight is another one that many of them use. Like here's an example, the Andromeda Galaxy. A lot of people don't realize that's two images right there and there. The trick is to get rid of that seam so that nobody can see it. So here you see it's about 90% of the way there. But I left it on there just so you can still see the seam. But it takes a lot of work in Photoshop to get rid of that, blend it all together seamlessly, and then you still need another picture over there and another picture there, and that's how you get 9 hours of exposure time. So
how, you get 9 hours of exposure time?
yeah, so like the Andromeda Galaxy that I showed you, the more recent one I did it in 4 quads. So each quad, you're talking 2 to 3 hours. So you're taking it in black and white luminance, and then red, blue, and green for each quad. So you really have to have a crystal clear night with no clouds passing in front. It's best to do it in one night because your transparency, like on this particular picture, the transparency changed from one night to the next. I took that on 2 consecutive nights, and there's a bit of more of a purple hue there, and that just might be because the humidity is a little bit higher that night, which would throw the cast off. And you can fix that in Photoshop, but if you do it all in one night, then your hue is going to be pretty much the same all the way across the board.
Did you have to take a range of exposure times also?
For this one, no, but for the Orion Nebula, yes. That one, because the Orion Nebula is so bright, you can go into Photoshop and dim the core down so it doesn't blow out too much. But the Orion Nebula, if you want to catch the 4 stars in the middle of the trapezium, you got to do a short, like 30-second exposure, and then bracket your way up to 15 minutes or so, and then stack all those together. But like I said, all that it takes a lot of time on Photoshop. So anyway, so if I do a follow-up down the road, it would be on image processing and Photoshop and that kind of stuff, how it ties in with astrophotography.
So are you using pure Photoshop, or are you using Lightroom?
Yeah, so the full version of Photoshop, and I use Registar for stacking the images. Because when you do the mosaic, you got to have this image line up perfectly with that image to do your adjustments on there. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.